Did you know there's a fancy name for the fear of failure? It is called acticophobia. Sounds like something you would name a dinosaur, right? But on a serious note, I firmly believe that the fear of failure is worse than failing on a project in itself. Welcome to our channel and welcome to today's episode where I'll be diving deep into the quagmire of the fear of failure. Why do I say it is worse than the act of failing in itself? Because while failing might bruise your ego, the fear of failing can bruise your entire being. When you're dreading a negative outcome, your body starts to pump out adrenaline like it's trying to win a hormone race. And too much adrenaline is like, let's say, drinking 10 cups of coffee at the same time and you're trying to thread a needle. And let's not forget our friendly enemy called the cortisol hormone. Prolonged fear of failure makes your body churn out cortisol. And trust me, too much cortisol is damaging for the body. Can you imagine someone going through all of this just because they are scared of failing? Well, I've been there. In 2018, I organized the first ever Emotional Intelligence Conference in Africa, the Africa Emotional Intelligence Conference. And to make it Pan-Africa, I invited speakers from Ghana, from Kenya, from South Africa, and from Dubai. Before now, I'd never organized any program that huge in my consulting career. The budget was so huge, it was really threatening. I had secured the venue and the rooms to host the speakers, but I still needed a lot of money to put other things in place. We had sent out proposals to organizations, and guess what? 2 weeks to the event, only one person had paid for that program. One person. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Would people register? Would they pay? Would we have enough people in the hall? Would the speakers actually come to Nigeria? All these uncertainties turned into fear, and my body started to respond to my fear. Now, about 2 weeks to the event, I was constantly urinating. Every few minutes I'm urinating, and I'm wondering what's going on. Now, when I'm pressed and I don't go to the gents to urinate, the entire body starts to feel a certain kind of discomfort. I had to go to the hospital for them to check me. I'm a very healthy person and it's very strange. Well, I got to the hospital, they did all the body tests, all my organs were tested. After all the tests, the doctor said, "Guy, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you." I explained my discomfort, but he said I should just go take a rest. After a while, I started telling myself, how can I be organizing an emotional intelligence conference and then I cannot manage the fear, this little fear of failure within me? On the outside, everything seemed to be fine, but on the inside, something seemed to be wrong. So I told myself I must practice this emotional intelligence on myself to be justified in teaching other people emotional intelligence in the conference. That's how I started coaching myself out of fear. Stay with me and I'll tell you exactly what I did to stop the fear of failure in that situation. It was some months after the conference that I remember that there was an issue because I wasn't feeling it anymore. It has stopped. That's how dangerous the fear of failure can be. The conference was a very successful conference. Meanwhile, the fear of possible failure was breaking my body. The fear of failure can be so deadly to your pursuits. It makes people procrastinate. It can lead individuals into delay or make people afraid of starting. It leads to missed deadlines, rushed work. It can stop people from taking risks because the fear of failing might avoid innovative solutions and new approaches, making people opt for safe methods that are not the most efficient or effective. It creates decision paralysis. The fear of making a wrong decision can even lead to indecision in itself, which leads to delay in making crucial choices. Obsessive fear of failure can lead to perfectionism, where too much time is spent on minor details, checking if things are right, and it reduces progress. All of these can lead to stress, reputation damage, missed opportunities, financial loss, and the statistics show that 31% of American adults have acute fear of failure. 90% of CEOs agreed that the fear of failure is their main cause of distress. 48% Britons are deterred from starting a hobby because of the fear of failure. 51.8% of entrepreneurs in the United Kingdom report having a fear of startup failure. 24% of Australian adults are afraid of failure of work. So how do we deal with the fear of failure? Let me start with what I did in my own situation. After recognizing that what was going on with me is the fear of failure, I sat down and I spoke to myself. I asked myself, what is the worst thing that can happen if people don't register? I thought about several things and concluded that people not registering is actually the worst thing that will happen. So what will I do if people don't register? I decided that 2 days before the conference, if the registration is very poor, I will turn the conference into a free conference. The major reason we sustain fear and anxiety is a sense of uncertainty and a sense of powerlessness. So what I did in my case was to move from uncertainty, which is, will people pay for this conference or not, into certainty, which is, I will make it a free conference and the hall will be full if people don't pay. So one major step to deal with the fear of failure is to identify the certainty inside the uncertainty. And as a life coach that has worked with countless number of people, I know for sure that there is certainty in every uncertainty. Now let's look at how to manage the fear of failure that's stemming from external pressure. And Segun's story will be a perfect example here. Segun has been with a tech firm for about 5 years. His managers and colleagues started hinting him that he is next in line for a particular leadership role. The new position promises a substantial pay raise and the prestige of leading a large team. Everyone, including his peers, seemed to be excited about the obvious next step in Segun's career. Segun, however, felt so uneasy. He loved his current technical leadership role and worried that a leadership position beyond his technical activities would distance him from the technical activities. And the need to improve soft skills would also be a challenge. The external pressures made him anxious about the possibility of disappointing his colleagues and superiors, and the potential office gossip if he declined the promotion was also a concern for Segun. This is typical fear of failure. If you're like Segun, this is how you should handle this fear of failure. First step is self-reflection. Now, it's always the first step. Self-reflection is often overlooked, and it's one of the most powerful things you can do in the face of failure. Remember my story? That's what I did when I sat down to ask myself, what is the worst that can happen? So if you're like Segun, you must sit down and ask yourself some critical questions. For example, what ignites your heart and passion? For Segun, it's the technical job. He loves it. What exactly are the thoughts beneath the fear? For Segun, it is the thought of the possibility of not being successful and the loss of continuous technical activities. Overall, what do you want in your career? For Segun, he wants continuous career growth. When you get into intentional self-reflection like this, first, you have taken charge of yourself rather than allowing the emotions of fear to overwhelm you. Secondly, you are gaining insight about the issue. In emotional intelligence, this is what we call self-awareness. The second step is what I call open communication. When you're overwhelmed with fear in a situation like this, one of the challenges people have is not communicating. As far as we continue to internalize the issues, it will continue to consume us from the inside. So one way to break uncertainty associated with fear is to communicate. In this case, clarity in our mind deserves clarity in our words. Segun, it's time to speak with someone about your fears and about the clarity you have during the first step, the reflection step. Let the person know your challenges. The person can be a mentor, a coach, a colleague, if you can find a mature one. This communication would help you gain further clarity. For different people, it will be different outcome. This discussion would give you confidence about your capacity. It will help you to identify your strength or the strength that you need to develop. It could help you to realize that I have to reject this offer and be at peace, irrespective of whatever anybody will say. I can't tell exactly what the outcome will be, but I can tell you that if you have a very good discussion, you will come out of it with certainty about the situation. I have done this with countless people and they've gone away with clarity. Step 3 would be boundary setting. Boundary setting. This is important because you need to decide what you let into your heart or around your space in the midst of all that is going on. What you take in will determine what you are filled with. So you need to guard your heart with all diligence, if you understand what I mean. You can set boundaries for your heart and external boundaries with people around you. Internally, you can choose what type of thoughts you will not sustain within you, and externally, you can decide, for example, the kind of discussion you won't have regarding the promotion, such that if anyone brings that promotion discussion to your table, you'll be able to tell them, I don't want to discuss that. That's step 3. Now, step 4 is reframing your perspective. I know you've heard of perspective reframing, but permit me to dive deep into it a little for you. Imagine you're looking at a painting from a distance. You might see the serene landscape, but as you move closer to the painting, you start noticing intricate details, the hidden shadow, the subtle play of light. The painting has not changed, but the way you perceive it has changed. That is the essence of reframing. Reframing is about challenging our initial perception about an issue. It's about asking ourselves, is there another way to interpret this situation? Can I see this challenge as an opportunity? Is it a setback or perhaps a redirection to something better? You have to ask yourself these questions. Reframing is always powerful. You're not lying to yourself. No, you're not. You're selecting from the options of several possible meanings to the situation, and you know that nothing means anything except the meaning that you give to it. So for Segun in this case, at the first glance, Segun might see this promotion as a looming expectation, a path that everyone else believes he should take, but he doesn't want. The weight of the potential office gist, the fear of disappointing other people, and the uncertainty about the role itself can becloud Segun's judgment. But here is why reframing becomes important. Instead of viewing the promotion as a burden or a box he's being forced into, what if Segun saw it as a recognition of his hard work? What if Segun view it as not a predetermined path, but as an array of possibilities for him? By adjusting the perspective, Segun could see the promotion offer as an opportunity to redefine his role, to negotiate terms that align with his passion, and to even carve out unique space for himself within the organization, and without losing the technical bit. The beauty of reframing is that it doesn't change the external situation, it changes your internal interpretation. Now let's deal with the fear of failure as a result of past experiences. And Esther's story will be very good here. A year ago, Esther led a project which unfortunately did not go as planned. The project faced setbacks. The team missed crucial deadlines and it was a disaster. The aftermath, a dent in Esther's confidence. Now she's been given a new chance to lead another project. But the shadows of the last project is overwhelming Esther with the fear of failure. She's scared that this new project might turn out the same way. To make matters worse, there are already side talks in the organization about Esther failing the project. You know how people can be silly at work. What should Esther do to deal with this fear of failure? First step to managing this type of failure is acknowledgement. Instead of pushing the feelings aside, Esther needs to acknowledge them. If you are like Esther with a past terrible experience, you have to come to a place of acknowledgement where you say to yourself, the last project did not go well. Accept it, embrace it, and then take time to reflect on what went wrong. Don't cast blame or identify excuses. No, just recognize the key points that led to the failure of the project. When you do this, again, you're taking charge of what happens in your mind rather than be enslaved by all the possible negative thoughts flushing through your mind. And then the next step, step 2, is to have self-compassion for yourself. This is because you have to affirm yourself in order to move ahead. Yes, terrible things happen, but you need compassion for you. How do you do this? Let me paint a picture. When you have compassion on other people in situations like Esther's situation, how do you do it? You will most likely encourage them, motivate them. You will let them know that it's just one project. It doesn't define them. You will give them materials to read, to improve themselves. You probably even would take them out just to help them be in a better place. Self-compassion demands that you do all of these things to yourself. The benefit of this is that it will help you improve your daily emotional well-being. You will be in a healthy emotional state as you approach the new project rather than be overwhelmed with the failure of the past. Self-compassion will increase your self-worth and thus help you gain better self-esteem. More importantly, it will build your resilience towards the next project. Please don't confuse self-compassion for self-pity. We'll discuss that another day. Now, step 3, it will be for you to now grow intentionally and validate yourself. So remember, step 1 is acknowledgement and reflection on mistakes made in the past project and all that went wrong. Step 3 is the stage where you intentionally improve on the possible deficiencies in whatever skills that can help you to achieve the goal with this new project. And lastly, Esther, you should continue to validate yourself by reminding yourself of projects that you have successfully done in the past. Now, it doesn't matter whether it is a small successful project or a big successful project, it doesn't matter. If you wait for someone to come and validate you, no one would validate you. In fact, people might begin to remind you of how you failed in the last project. So if you're an Esther, you would have to constantly remind yourself of wins, successes as you learn new things to help you grow. And of course, that the failed projects are not your finality, as growth is always available for you. This is how to beat the fear of failure from past experiences. As I wrap up on this episode, if your fear of failure is as a result of what other people are going to say with the project, meaning you are overwhelmed with what people will say if you fail, you need to acknowledge that you have that fear. Practically, this means you need to speak to yourself and say, I know I'm scared, not necessarily about the project, but because of what people will say, these loud-mouthed people. Speak to yourself, or because of what your father will say or what your mother will say again. After this, then limit or erase mind reading. Erase mind reading, which is constantly imagining what people will say because of what has happened in the past. Rather than mind reading, replace it with the imagination of the possible success of the project, which means every time your mind generates thoughts of what they might say if the project fails, replace it. Give your mind what to generate by replacing that automatic thought with intentional thoughts, which is seeing the success of the project continuously. Now, this is what will eventually happen if you practice this thought replacement continuously. After a while, your mind will forget the thoughts of what they might say. Your mind will get used to the thoughts of the success of the project that you continuously give to it. I mean your mind. With these, you will lose the fear of failure from what people will say and gain the confidence of success. Lastly, if your fear of failure is as a result of perfectionism, meaning your drive for perfection is overwhelming you and you are wondering if the task at hand will come out perfectly, I don't envy you. Let me first inform you that you can never be perfect. And even in your most supposedly perfect state, someone can still come and spot flaws in your work. So, to help you beat that fear, you have to first acknowledge that you have fear and perfectionism is a plague for you. Talk to yourself. Talk to yourself in a reflective mode and then go to the next step, which is recheck your expectations and see if they are realistic. You can't afford to set unrealistic goals and then overwhelm yourself with the fear of not achieving them. You have already set yourself up for anxiety. This can be unrealistic timeline, unrealistic budget, unrealistic tasks for those who are working with you, and so on. If there are huge tasks that seem overwhelming, break them into smaller bits. Seeing them in smaller bits would give you courage to face them, to see them as doable rather than huge and overwhelming. Once you are clear that your expectations are realistic, the next thing to do is to stop every form of comparison going on within you. Stop comparing yourself with others. It's a distraction from the focus on the work at hand. And the basis for comparison might not just make sense because you probably don't even have all the details associated with the person and the project you are comparing yourself to. And then begin to recognize your wins and have compassion on yourself, like I explained earlier. All through this episode, I've used the principle of emotional intelligence to help you deal with the fear of failure. That is by helping you increase awareness through acknowledging self-reflection and self-questioning. That's know yourself. Then I deployed choose yourself, or what we call self-management, by helping you see the options available to you so that you can make choices. And then I deployed give yourself, or what we call self-direction, by helping you see the goal and the project at hand instead of focusing on the fear of failing the project. That's how we practice emotional intelligence, and I hope you go out there to do it. Until the next episode, go out there and conquer that fear of failure. I'll see you in the next episode.